Hi, welcome to Culturally Determined on Blogging Hits TV. I'm your host, Aryeh Cohen-Wade, and my guest is Daniel Kaufman. Dan, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, Aryeh. Yes, I'm Daniel Kaufman, professor of philosophy at Missouri State University. I also host the Sophia program on meaningoflife.tv and publish an online magazine called The Electric Agora. I am Aryeh's most often repeated guest, and now I've done more research. I went back into the archives before this show happened. I think we did like 5 of them before the show happened. So I'm waiting to be unseated.
Yeah. So we had some dispute about who was the guest who's appeared on this program the most, and now I think you're gonna have the throne for a long time unless something kind of drastically changes. So we're coming together to once again talk about Star Wars. We discussed after the Force Awakens, which was the kind of rebooted resetting of the Star Wars universe that came out in 2015. We talked about that, and then I think last year actually we talked about some of the Last Jedi and the 2 kind of side movies, Rogue One and Solo. So we figured we would come together one more time, maybe the last time, but who knows with this Star Wars universe, to talk about the film that just came out, the Rise of Skywalker. A kind of almost forgettable title, actually, because I thought it was The Return of Skywalker when I was typing it into Google, but it's the Rise of Skywalker. And I think, why don't we talk a little bit at the beginning in a spoiler-free discussion of it and just talk about our general thoughts, and then maybe we could get into a more spoilery discussion of the movie, which does have some twists and turns and some big surprises. Okay, what was your general impression of the movie?
Right. So ultimately, there's no way to really critique the movie in a coherent way without spoiling it, but I can at least initially give some impressions. I have I had a pretty negative reaction to the film. And I have 2 basic reasons for being negative. One is just the construction of the film itself. I thought was very reminiscent of a not greatly written video game. I almost felt like the different parts were like levels thrown into a video game just to stretch out the time of the film. Obviously, to cash out that complaint, I'll have to give spoilers, so I won't cash it out now. The other complaint I have is more along the lines of the theme of your program, Aryeh, and that is that I thought that Last Jedi clearly defined this three episode reboot arc as a kind of a passing of the torch to a new generation of young millennial and Gen Z fans, and did so in good part by expressing the ethos of those generations within the sort of the universe of Star Wars and within the story of these characters and what happens to them. And while it's not my cup of tea, because these are films for young people, I do think that that's appropriate, right? And so I said at the time, it's like, well, this is sort of a thing where I don't really like it personally, but I understand that this film is trying to create grounds for new generations to enjoy this universe. I think Rise of Skywalker kind of messes that all up and leaves this last 3 movies without a kind of coherent sort of theme or a coherent sort of place in the Star Wars universe. So that's my other reason for being unhappy with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would say coming out of it, I thought I would give it like a B- or so. Parts were okay. The acting was good. It generally looked good. There were parts there was a lot of fan servicey parts put in there. Little moments to make the hardcore or somewhat, middlecore fan smile, and so it has some good parts, but yeah, there are a lot of problems. A lot of kind of maybe a retcon or changing the rules of the Star Wars universe as we understood them before seeing it, which pisses off the fans.
Say what a retcon is, because
retroactive continuity, kind of like, saying, oh, it was always like this, like, but really you're introducing a new change or something. And I agree. It seemed discordant Well, actually, I mean, I guess all three of this new iteration of the films were discordant, which was kind of weird because J.J. Abrams directed Force Awakens and this one, but this one was very different than Force Awakens, I thought. And then Last Jedi had a different feel as well. And yeah, I was actually I haven't like read a ton of reviews, but I was listening to the Slate spoiler special where they go through point by point, and they had a Star Wars superfan on the panel. And she was saying not only did it like kind of undermine this new trilogy, she was saying she thought it undermined the entire project. There are some things that happened that seem to violate like core ideas established maybe from the beginning or always going back to the prequels. So yeah, so it's weird. I kind of didn't feel great after seeing it, and you know I'm not super eager to see it again, whereas like I would watch Force Awakens again. I don't think I would watch Last Jedi again. I as to whether this one was better than Last Jedi, it's weird. They were like bad in different ways, and I'm not sure which one I would rather rewatch. Honestly, maybe this one, because I really didn't like I didn't like Last Jedi. But okay, so let's delve into spoiler territory. So probably most people, you know, if they're watching this at this point, have seen it. So let's jump in. So, I mean, okay, let's start at the very beginning. So I was reminded once again that, you know, there's really, for me at least, no other feeling in cinema like you're sitting in the dark theater and it says the blue words come up a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and then Star Wars appears on screen with that blaring of the trumpets, and it really is like I felt like a physical jolt when that happened. It's really strong. It has such an identifiable sort of quality. Yeah, it's one of the most iconic things in cinema, and like Star Wars has brought me so much pleasure over the years that I just felt so good. I was just like, yes, like we're here once again, we're ready for the ride. And then what's the first thing that appears on the screen? I think it's the phrase "the dead speak" on the crawl, and you're like, the dead speak. What the hell does that mean? And then it starts talking about. There's been a message from Emperor Palpatine has been released across the universe. Now, apparently, did you know this, that this like message appeared in the Star Wars Fortnite tie-in game?
I've read it now subsequent to having seen the movie. After I saw the movie, I wanted to sort of prepare for this dialogue, so I read a bunch of stuff, and then I saw that.
Okay, so I saw that. I didn't watch whatever the message was, but that's strange. And there's always been this thing about how, you know, they're bringing in the crawl. And, like, in Star Wars A New Hope, like, you had the crawl because there was this whole backstory of the movies they didn't make yet, so you had to, like, fill it in and stuff. And then, but this is, okay, so they're bringing back, like, the ultimate villain from the original trilogy, aside from Darth Vader, and suddenly he's alive again. And there's no explanation that I saw of how he's alive after being thrown down an endless, you know, space tube, seemingly to his demise in Return of the Jedi. So it's just like, what the hell? Like, okay, characters come back to life in science fiction and fantasy all the time, in comic books and stuff, but like, you have to at least explain it, not just like he's back again, and he's like in this kind of he's like into this kind of crane thing, like a you know, so he's clearly not at least the top of his game, but
he's not well. He's not, as we might say.
Right, but he's been in hiding for 25 years or something since Return of the Jedi, and it's just like, what the fuck?
Well, it's worse than that. It's that we find out very soon. And this is one of the things about the construction of the film that I had a problem with, that there were so many things that were just, you know, it just constantly broke the rule of show, don't tell. It just constantly just kept saying, and this happened, and that happened, and you're just like, huh? And it's not just that he's alive, but we find out that the whole First Order thing was basically a giant red herring, that it was just him all along, which also had a very Rube Goldberg-y kind of quality to it. I mean, we find out later in the film that he's got some vast and a ridiculous fleet of Star Destroyers that must have been taking decades to build. Now, if you had this kind of firepower, why the hell go through the whole First Order rigmarole? I mean, the whole thing made no sense, and then raised the question of, well, why are they doing this at all? And my theory, Aryeh, and I don't know if you agree with this, but my theory was that the reaction to and I'm going to call it toxic fandom because that's what it is. The toxic fan reaction to Last Jedi was so powerful that they kind of whiplashed back in the opposite direction and said, okay, well, then we'll just go back and go back with the stuff that was popular, right? The stuff that the people liked. And so we'll bring the old villain back and everything. But that then completely undermines, to my view, what I thought they were trying to do with this trilogy, which is, like I said, reboot the universe and the story for young people, right? For people to whom those old things, maybe they've watched them, but their Star Wars was going to be this new Star Wars, you know? So I don't know how you feel. What you think about the motivations?
Yeah, I don't. It's weird. I mean, what it made me think was like there was kind of a core conceptual problem with the entire rebooted project, and like I really liked Force Awakens, and we discussed 4 years ago. It was kind of a like almost beat by beat remake of the original Star Wars, but they didn't do a ton of explaining about like, okay, supposedly the Rebel Alliance is victorious at the end of Return of the Jedi. The Empire is defeated, and then but somehow, so then we think like, okay, they're rebuilding the Republic or something. But then somehow it's like they are once again, like 25 years later, they are once again the embattled rebels, now called the Resistance, and the Empire has reformulated itself to be the First Order. Yeah. But you don't like. Okay, I guess we're supposed to think like somehow the Emperor did all this, but like they don't really explain like what like. Why did they try to do like a government again and like it failed, or what happened in between the space that made it like where did they build, like who was building the First Order's ships, like where did they get the money from, like they're not in charge anymore, they can't raise taxes from the outlying planetary systems. How are they like where are these people coming from who are staffing the are they in, like who's in charge here? Like they never explained any of this.
Somebody figured out
when just so they could do this reboot.
Somebody figured out how many people it takes to man a Star Destroyer, and then counted the number of Star Destroyers that were in this new Emperor's fleet, and figured out that it needed like 20 million people or something to like staff all of these things. Which for when you're making science fiction. And you're assuming that your audience has got a good portion of geeks in it, you just can't do stuff like that because they're going to just pick your bones. What you said about Force Awakens, if you remember, I remember very well the conversation. I remember what I said to you. I said, look, normally doing a total clone of the original movie would have been a serious mistake and a serious problem. I said, but if what they're trying to do is essentially reboot this for new people whose sensibility and ethos is totally different from the Gen Xers like me who were going to the theater in 1977 to see the original film, then I understand it. And if they carry that through, I think it's a good idea. So think about what they did. They replaced Darth Vader with kind of hipster Darth Vader, right? So, he's tormented. He's much more He's much more like you think a Gen Z millennial villain would be, right? You have the Mary Sue hero because, of course, women, if they're going to be leads, must be 10 times more super powerful than all the men, right? And never make any mistakes. And she's automatically super powered from the beginning with no training at all. That's sort of also within the contemporary mode. They made the older character, the Luke Skywalker character, he's the bad dad, he's sort of, those old people, they really screwed everything up and they don't know what they're doing. And it had a very okay boomerish kind of quality to it. But that's all fine as far as I'm concerned because the movies are not being made for 50-year-old men, right? That's not who they're being made for. The problem is that then now they just kind of totally chucked all of it and went back to the old staples, and now it's the Emperor who's the villain again, and we find out that all that other stuff just turned out to just be a giant red herring while he was building the gazillion Star Destroyer fleet. And I thought that was a shame, and I thought that it was because of the backlash reaction from curmudgeonly older people and toxic fans who so piled on The Last Jedi that Disney made some panicky corporate kind of decision is what it felt like to me, but I don't know what you think.
I mean, that seems possible. I mean, it definitely has like they're trying to please a wide range of people, from people who saw the original Star Wars in 1977 in theaters to, a 9-year-old kid today. I actually saw it with my mother, and she said she thought it was really scary for a child would be really scared of this movie. So maybe they're moving away from young kids, whereas a young kid can pretty much watch the original Star Wars, and maybe Empire Back is a little bit darker, but that's a movie that from age 5 to 55 or whatever. But yeah, so I could definitely see that there was some that maybe there was some corporate kind of thing from Disney to not go in certain directions, and they certainly had a lot of fan backlash from Last Jedi. But so there's one. So let's talk about some of the things that kind of were the twists or the retcons or something. Okay, so Last Jedi kind of played with this idea that so there's always been this sort of like genetic determinism aspect to who can manipulate the Force, who's Force sensitive and not, and that you find out that Darth Vader is a great Jedi, and so is Luke. Oh, it turns out that they are father and son. And
isn't there like a quasi biological explanation offered at some point?
Yeah, in the first prequel, they came up with this thing, midi-chlorians, that's supposed to be like in the DNA, but then they junked that, and it was never mentioned again, as far as I know, because the fans really didn't like it. But still, there was always this kind of like lineage idea, and then you find out that Kylo Ren is the child of Han and Leia is a Jedi. Actually, I actually did like the scene where you see Luke training Leia. I saw some complaints about that online because it was obviously CGI. But anyway, but then they it was
really a retcon though, isn't it? I mean, the whole idea that Leia was never a Jedi. And now she's training Rey, and you know what I mean. And so then they had to go back and say, "Well, she was a Jedi because Luke trained her. You just didn't know that."
Well, I believe
that struck me as cheap. No.
Well, I believe in so there was all these expanded universe like books and comic books and stuff. Okay. I believe in that universe.
I don't know that material very well.
I only know it a little bit. I believe in that universe. They talk about Leia becoming a Jedi, but also you remember Yoda says there is another. Okay. So it's implied that she has the Force sensitivity that if she's trained, she can become a Jedi.
Gotcha.
So, but then you have Rey, and there was this whole question: who's Rey's parents? And in the beginning, the obvious answer would be she's Luke's daughter, but that is not the case. And then in the second movie, Last Jedi, it's revealed in this a very striking sequence, one of the few visual sequences I remember from that movie, where she's kind of looking in like a magical mirror that stretches to infinity, showing her past and her future. And it's implied that she's almost like self-created, or it doesn't matter who her parents are. But
doesn't Kylo tell her that her parents are two nobodies?
Yes, Kylo says your parents are nobodies. Yeah. And then there's this scene at the very end of the movie where there's a little stable boy who had a brief encounter with our heroes, and you see him making a broom move, with his mind. So it's like the idea is established that it's not just that there's these couple of people who through their royal lineage are able to have this magical power, but there's maybe millions of possible Jedis out there, and they have the power within them, and blah blah blah. So that's a little. That was
also in keeping with the new sensibility, with appealing to the new.
It's a little Harry Potterish.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have the people have the power within them, but it's also like a kind of a democratic idea. And I kind of like that, and then that seemed to resolve the question of Rey's parentage, of saying, it doesn't matter.
But then they undid it now.
And then I don't know if it counts as a retcon exactly, but I think it does actually, because Kylo said, your parents were nobodies. And, it turns out she is Emperor Palpatine's granddaughter. Which is, I don't know, it's just so strange. It's almost like...
But don't you think that was a post hoc way of trying to explain and respond to the Mary Sue criticisms? It's like... Why is this girl so powerful? She's more powerful than freaking Yoda. Why? She can pull spaceships out of the air. And why is that? Oh, because she's the Emperor's granddaughter. The problem is, since when was the Emperor that powerful? There's one scene at the end where the Emperor literally by himself holds up the entire fleet, right? And if he had been that powerful to begin with, the rebels never could have possibly won, right? It was almost like squeezing a bulge out of a tire and just having it appear on the other side, and doing that 6 times is what it almost felt like.
Yeah, It's never clear what it's never clear exactly how powerful the Emperor is. If he's like, why does he need the Death Star if he's seemingly so powerful?
Darth Vader just picked him up and threw him off of a right. I mean,
yeah, clearly, like, you know, he could have. I mean, maybe the answer is that he just flew back up because if he can lift like 10,000
I thought his
ships
power
into
was
the air.
always more manipulative. He was a master of manipulating the politics, is what we got through the prequels, and I thought that was well done, and it was plausible. But now he's like super Jedi. I mean, he's more powerful than Yoda and all those guys put together by what they showed him do in this film.
Because Yoda, when Yoda lifts the X-wing,
X-wing, right?
He's clearly struggling. Obviously, he's late in life and he dies not too much longer. But yeah, it seemed like that was, you know, kind of the extent of Jedi power at that point. Okay, but so then so this is, you know, like, why did they do this? I don't know. So I guess they wanted, you know, they liked, obviously one theme of this series is like the bad father. You know, like Darth Vader means dark father. Exactly. And what is like one's legacy when you have a bad father. And so that's replaying the Darth Vader Luke relationship in some respect, but it just seemed like such a misstep to me. And then they had Kylo have to explain that, I meant they were nobodies, like, after they went into hiding or something. But also, like, when Palpatine had a wife and fathered at least one child, like, this was never part of the universe before this. So yeah, it seemed fucked up overall, and was like why are they doing this kind of moment. But there were also there was some other kind of things where they were seemingly changing the rules of the universe. And that was kind of the biggest one, like Palpatine having a child, but also like, Force, like when Luke is a Force ghost, he's able to, Rey throws her lightsaber into the fire and he grabs it, and then he lifts, doesn't he lift the X-Wing out of the water? So
yes.
It seemed like, because
she escapes in Kylo Ren's ship and then destroys it so that she won't be able to leave the island because she wants to exile herself,
right?
The same way Luke did, and for the same reason that Luke did, because she's afraid of turning bad, right? And then Luke changes his mind. He's like, "Oh, I was wrong about all that," right? So they reversed his arc. I had sort of come to peace with the idea of him having a troubled arc, and so many people were so angry about it, but I actually thought it was handled in The Last Jedi relatively well. I thought it was realistic to a certain degree in terms of human psychology, and he just like changed his mind in this. And then she's like, "Oh, okay, I'll change my mind too." He lifts the ship out of the water, and then she goes and flies up. It was very facile, right? I mean, these were like serious things, and again, it reversed what I thought they were trying to do altogether, right? In a way that I don't think it doesn't please me as an old guy who liked the old ones, and it doesn't please me as someone who's trying to be generous to the new generations who want to have this wonderful experience. I felt like it sort of pleases nobody, right? I mean,
I agree. And then, so okay, well, there's one other kind of big kind of retcon or change in the universe, but that's towards the end, which is bring someone back to life. But let's hold on to that because that's kind of the finale of the movie. But then, so other things that I was not too happy with. I mean, we've been kind of nitpicking these thematic elements, but just like, I mean, on a plot perspective, it's like there's a MacGuffin, these little like triangular diamond transponder things or maps or whatever. So they need to get it, and it's just like.
That's the video game part. That's where I felt like it was like video game levels. Like, oh, we have to find the planet where the Emperor is. We need the MacGuffin. Oh, we got the MacGuffin, but we can't translate the things on it. C-3PO can translate them, but because they're in Sith language, he's not allowed to translate them. So we have to get C-3PO somewhere. You go through this, and you just feel like you're playing a video game that they're trying to stretch out.
Yeah, I
felt like I was playing Dragon Age Inquisition, and they're trying to make this thing last 100 hours. So they're giving me all these sort of stupid Rube Goldberg kind of obstacles that I have to overcome.
Yeah, they're creating
felt that way.
They're creating new rules so that they can stretch out the plot, like C-3PO can't speak the evil Sith language, blah blah. But then also like there are these points where so they have to go and get C-3PO's memory wiped,
right?
And so then that's like there's some humor in this, and he's like introducing himself. again. So then you're kind of like, okay, well, like C-3PO like kind of died in a way, or there was some sacrifice involved for 3PO in like completing this mission. And then once he gets back, R2 is able to R2 has like backed up in iCloud all of his memories, and so that sacrifice is meaningless. And the same thing with Chewbacca. Like you think Chewbacca dies when the ship is blown up, and it's like no, he was on another ship, but we didn't even see another ship. Like that was truly bizarre.
Terrible. None of the things they introduced all sorts of things and then didn't allow the consequences of them to play out. They did the same thing with characters, right? So we get this female mercenary type character who knows who we are given reason to believe has significant backstory with Poe, right? Yeah. And then they make nothing of it. I mean, she never even takes off her freaking helmet throughout the whole thing.
Do you know who played her? It was Kerry Russell.
Oh wow!
So
that's even more weird that they wouldn't have taken.
Very strange. Like a hardcore, she Emmy-winning actress.
Yeah,
pretty well known.
Yeah,
but they keep 80% of her face covered the entire time and 100% of it MO. So that was strange. I mean, that's
and then they did the same thing with the lady on the planet with the horses, right? You think that something's going to develop between her and Finn, and then nothing does, right? I mean, just. And
they also, they left hanging when they all think they're going to die at one point. Finn says, "I have to tell you something" to Rey, and he never says what it is. Maybe it was just "I love you" or something, but he never they never fill that in. So yeah, there was just a lot of. It was almost like they either the script was undercooked or overcooked, and they didn't think through the plot points. And they're like, okay, we want to kill off Chewie, but then we need Chewie back again. So actually, he's on another ship, and then we need to because we have to go rescue someone and be on a ship for 20 minutes. And just further complaints. The thing where Donald Gleason, if that's how you pronounce his name, turned out to be the spy who was feeding information to the Resistance, and he reveals this by just looking at them and saying, "I'm the spy," which is almost like a laughable
And then within 30 seconds, he's just executed, and that's done with him, right?
And then he dies. I did think that the guy who was kind of like the Grand Moff Tarkin role, Richard Grant. Yeah. I thought he was good as the.
He's great. He's great villain. In it. And I couldn't tell that he looked very angry, and I couldn't tell whether it was plot related or whether he was angry at the movie he was in. How
did I end up here? Well, I'm sure he's happy to have the work. At this point, he was successful early in his career with Nail and I, but he was nominated for an Oscar last year.
He was quite good in this, though. I agree with you.
Yeah, he was good. Yeah. So then, okay, so there's just a lot of shenanigans and getting from point A to point B, and then you find out you need to get to point C and blah blah blah. And I mean, so another thing that was very stupid was the business with the knife that has Sith. That's what the Sith is written on it, but it also turns out to. It's the knife that her parents were killed with, isn't it? Oh, is it? I thought it was just a random knife.
Isn't there a? I don't know why.
The parents are stabbed, but it's she holds it up, and it turns out that the jagged outline of the knife lines up with the Death Star. The
wreckage of the Death Star that they go to find the MacGuffin.
Yes,
but the problem is that if you actually watched the last Death Star being destroyed, it ain't destroyed like there's big pieces. I mean, it's destroyed like it's disintegrated, right?
Yeah.
So that was all very just sort of, I don't know.
And my brother compared it to a scene from Goonies or something with a secret map, and then it lines up perfectly. So that was very cheesy. And then so one scene that I did like, I've been complaining almost nonstop. I did like the scene where they're Kylo and Rey are in the ocean on this planet with 50-foot waves, and they're kind of fighting each other for a while, and then we didn't even mention that Princess Leia, General Organa, plays a role in this movie that is kind of it makes you feel weird because Carrie Fisher died, and they're using scraps of her performance or outtakes or something, and plus CGI.
I heard it was unused footage mostly from the previous.
Okay, so it doesn't look real. It doesn't look as good as it was supposed to be. Maybe in the original conception of this plot, Leia was going to play a big role. I mean, they killed off Luke in the previous movie and kept Leia alive, and then very sadly,
I think that's right.
Carrie Fisher died, so maybe they had to scramble, and that's one of the...
That's where they got Lando. It's like, all right, well, we better get somebody else.
Yeah, we didn't even mention Lando.
We killed off everybody.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so they killed off two... Yeah, they already killed off two of the three main characters, then the actor who played the other one died. So she's there in the beginning, but it's always like... the scenes just seem, have this uncanny element to them because they're not actually shot with a living human. So they don't really work that much. And then she's kind of, out of it for a long time. But then she kind of like sends a, psychic, like a single psychic message to Kylo Ren.
While he and Rey are fighting.
Yes, while they're fighting. And it's just the word Ben, which is his actual name, named after Ben Kenobi. And this is kind of like enough to like jar him out of his evil state. It
chases the dark side out of him.
Yeah.
And then Rey kills him. And then again, you're like, oh, wow, that's a major development. Wow. And then the consequences of that are erased because she just revives him.
Oh, no, wait. So she kills him later. She kills him later.
I thought that she has the opportunity to kill him because Leia distracts him with the... And then after she kills him, she resurrects him, then she leaves, and then Solo appears to him.
It's possible that she... Okay, maybe you're right. But I don't think she kills him. I think maybe she just wounds him, and she heals his wound. So it's also... Okay. So this idea of force healing is also introduced. Apparently it was part of the extended universe, but never actually seen previously in the movies that people with the force can heal... Yeah. Grievous wounds and stuff like that. So, okay, I can kind of buy that. Like,
I don't care about those. Those sorts of things don't bother me.
Right. So, Jedis have control over matter, and so maybe if they're really good, they can like knit, bones and and flesh back together. That's fine. So then, there's a scene where Harrison Ford returns, and he's not a Force ghost. He's just a memory. So he's inside. So we're inside.
He's inside Kylo's head. Yeah, yes. It has to be. Yeah,
and he's talking to him. And so I love Harrison Ford. Like most beloved actor of my childhood, perhaps. So it was nice to see him once again playing this iconic character. But in some way, it was like somewhat fan servicey. Like bring back Han Solo for one last go around, especially because we can't have Carrie Fisher. Maybe in the original script, like it was Carrie Fisher having a conversation with Kylo or something. I thought that was somewhat moving. I thought that was somewhat moving, though. I did too. It was this, this dream of the, the dead relative, the dead beloved relative, coming back for like one last time and having a conversation, and especially because, Kylo Ren killed Han Solo, so that makes it more emotionally charged, I guess. And so but there is a kind of absurd cheesiness to like her just sending this single like burst of psychic energy, and it knocks the evil out of the big bad guy in the universe. Yeah, he became unevil too easily, right? I mean, it undermines the last two movies, right? It underlines how they built him up. He was a very tormented, troubled person. Mm-hmm. Again, this was, I thought, in my view, to create a kind of villain that contemporary young people could identify with more than the remorseless sort of Darth Vader, right? And by doing this, they really undermined that whole thing that they'd really established with him. I really think they kind of destroyed his character by making him so easy to snap him out of his disturbance, so to speak. I mean, I actually thought they even were sort of somewhat casting him a little bit as sort of mentally ill throughout the first two films, in a way that I thought was done well, even though I didn't like it because I liked the older kind of villain, but I understood why they did it. And this just really blew it, right? I mean, and he became really uninteresting after that, right? He just became like a good guy, sacrificing himself. And I don't know, I just thought it was cheap, and it wouldn't satisfy the old people, and it broke it for the young people, right? Yeah, I mean, they wanted to have. Why did they do this? I guess I can't.
But did you find him interesting after that point? I didn't.
No, he doesn't really. I mean, he doesn't really do all that much, except he fights. He helps the fight, and then he sacrifices himself for Rey. I mean,
at the end, he saves Rey after the Emperor really kills them. Sort of, you think kills them both, sucks the life force out of them, throws throws Kylo over into a hole. Kylo somehow gets out, fights, just destroys these 5 supervillains who they've been setting up now for a while.
Knights of Ren, right?
And you think something really bad, that they're really going to be badasses. He dispatches of them in like 30 seconds, and then he comes and revives.
Okay, wait. So one before we get to the finale.
Yeah, sorry.
So Elizabeth Brunig, the writer of the Washington Post and soon to be New York Times, had kind of a semi-joking but maybe serious suggestion for a long time on Twitter that the best ending to this would be Kylo staying evil and converting Rey to the dark side. They team up. They become they're romantically linked, and they're ruling the universe with an iron fist.
And you could have set a whole nother trilogy after that. That could have set, you know what I'm saying? In other words, that would have been the perfect. And for a short while, I was hoping that was where they were going to go. This was the only film. Here's one good thing I'll say about this. The only film where it seemed to me Rey had any complexity and as a character. And I think if they'd gone that road, not only would that have been a satisfying ending, it would have been almost like an Empire Strikes Back-ish ending of this trilogy.
Right.
And you could have then set up now a whole nother trilogy after to now deal with this new threat, right?
Yeah, if they had ended it with the forces of evil triumphant, that would have been
really strong.
Both a shock to the audience and like a big dramatic risk, and then set things up for a different kind of story, but they want to have the ending where everyone's hugging and celebrating instead.
And do you think that's because they have decided this is it for this? Well, we don't want to play in this playground anymore.
They said the Skywalker saga or whatever is over, but they can keep spinning this shit off. I mean, they have the Mandalorian already that I haven't seen, but people are liking it, and they have all the intellectual property, so they can go and do related stories, and maybe like R2-D2 will appear in a cameo or something, but it'll mostly be its own thing, and it won't feature discussion of Luke and Leia and Darth Vader. So I can see that spinning out endlessly, and there's a lot of every character who appears on screen in any Star Wars movie has a name and a home planet and a backstory and all this shit. So it's like the Marvel universe in that they could keep on spinning it out, but can they actually tell a good story would be interesting. Okay, so I guess let's talk about the is there anything else to bring up? Okay, well let's talk about the finale. So we kind of mentioned it. Rey goes to fight the Emperor. Kylo teams up with her. He seems to have the power of all the Sith. When these guys are just kind of like, it's unclear who or what they are. They're kind of these shadowy, hooded figures who maybe aren't actually there. They're just like,
But there are a lot of them. I mean, you get a picture of that hall. I mean, it looks like 10,000
of them or something. But then But then it turns out that she has the power of all the Jedi and is able to appeal to all of. So we hear in voiceover. We don't see them. I guess like every Jedi who has appeared in the series. And apparently, they got a lot of the voice actors like Samuel Jackson. And
but not Alec Guinness, right?
Well, they may have manipulated Alec Guinness's voice in there, because I know in the first movie they had Alec Guinness saying Rey, which I read at the time was he had said like,
that's right, I forgot about that,
or something. They had like cut a word in half to make him say Rey. But Yoda is in there, and Luke and Leia are in there, blah blah. So they're all. She has the force of 10,000 Jedis, and also they make a big point that she doesn't just have Luke's lightsaber, she also has Leia's lightsaber. So she has two lightsabers. The Emperor is shooting his lightning bolts at her. Yeah, she's able to deflect it and send it back. To defeat it. So this kind of thing where, which is an interesting idea, and it's in the original movies that if you strike out in anger and kill me, then I win, actually. Yep. Because I've forced you to embrace your hatred.
That was consistent, I thought. Yeah, I thought that was, yeah.
So she gets out of it by, turning his, energy back against him, and is, I guess, able to kill him without, becoming an evil person or something along those lines. But yeah, so Kylo Ren is thrown down the pit. But as we know, getting thrown down a pit in the Star Wars universe totally fine. You can just climb out again. I mean, Luke did it, and apparently the Emperor did it. So Kylo Ren does it, and then he, but then I guess she's fried, and she seems dead. So so she's lying there, and then you think like, okay, wow, they faked us out with killing Chewbacca, but are they actually going to kill Rey? That'd be an interesting ending to this. Like, she sacrificed herself to save the universe, and but it turns out that Kylo Ren is able to force heal her, and I guess like give 100% of his life force to revive her, and then he is dead. So he's the one who he sacrifices as well. And this is a point that the aforementioned Slate Culture or Slate spoiler special made about this, was that a very key idea in the prequels is that you can't bring someone back to life. Even a Jedi cannot bring someone back to life, because Anakin Skywalker's mother is killed, and he desperately wants to bring her back, and that desire is what helps like unite him with Palpatine, because he's like, I will teach you how to do this, and that is like the path to the dark side. Like, once you're dead, you're dead, and you can't like, this is like the power of God or something, and you can't do it.
I actually think that's thematically I think that's strong thematically, actually.
Yeah. So and
actually there's elements there's things that are reminiscent of Lord of the Rings in that, right? I mean, humans are special precisely because they're mortal, and immortality is almost treated as a curse. Arwen in the films, Arwen wandering the world after everyone's died. And I think there's very deep, profound ideas there that I like that it was in Star Wars like that. And I really did not like. Now, maybe she wasn't dead and that's how they get around it, but I didn't like that.
Yeah. And the person on the Slate special was saying, maybe there was just akin to like, the paddles in a jolt of electricity or something to shock her back into life, because she's only been out for 30 seconds. So maybe there's still some life in her yet. But it is, it is, there does seem to be like one last final violation of like an idea that was firmly established in this universe. And also, I mean, that idea is also what leads his fear in the prequels, if I'm recalling correctly, Anakin's fear that Padme will die is what kind of drives him like insane.
Yes.
And leads him to the dark side also.
It's the clinging too hard. It almost has kind of like a Buddhist message.
Yes, I think that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And they just kind of spoiled it. Also, I really don't think they ever, in the case of Kylo, at least they gave us Leia's one-word intervention that caused him to drop the dark side to drop. But we never get any explanation as to why Rey is able to resist the dark temptation. And it's actually set up in the film pretty much that you could even argue that her taking that route is the right thing to do, right? I mean, in the sense of because you are given the impression that what Kylo's offering her, this joint rulership, isn't going to be of the kind of evil cruelty that was there. But you almost get the sense that she softened him a little. I got the sense that they could almost be more like a benevolent dictatorship together. And you know what I'm saying? In other words, I saw a lot of potential. And they never explain, and they even have her have the dream of her dark self, and the dark self looked absolutely amazing, right? And I just don't understand why. I don't understand why they didn't give that any space to develop, and they also didn't bother to explain why it didn't develop, right? I mean, it just sort of got aborted, right? And I don't know whether that's just poor design decision, poor craftsmanship, or whether they made a business decision that we are done with main sagas anymore, and now it's all just going to be one-offs in the universe of, right? Which, maybe that's a good business decision, maybe it isn't. I mean, on the notion that it's a good one, I would say if you ask me to now rethink all of the movies that have been made in this new reboots, I would say Rogue One is the best one by far. It's the one that I thought was the best made. I thought it was the most narratively coherent. I liked the protagonist. She was not a Mary Sue. There was no love interest, which I found very refreshing. And so maybe it is a wise decision to say no more sagas. Now we're just going to have one-offs in the universe. But if that wasn't the reason, then it's just bad craftsmanship, right? I mean, it's a bad way to end this.
Yeah. And I wonder if, in the future they're going to pursue the Marvel model of individual movies that stand on their own, but you realize you have to see them all in order to keep watching them because they intermix, and then there's like an Avengers style team up or something. Like they get that clearly works. They have that model, and I think actually the guy, his name is Feige or something like that, Kevin Feige, I think, who was the mastermind, like kind of the corporate mastermind behind the Marvel movies of the past 15 years. He is, I think, moving to work on Star Wars now that it's all owned by Disney.
Interesting.
Disney owns all the intellectual property.
Because Marvel, I think, pulled that off 1,000 times better.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you compare this to the final Avengers movie, like there's really, that is so much better. But so there's a couple more things that happen. So well, actually, so in this movie called Star Wars, there weren't a lot of like Star Wars, like the classic. Usually, there's a lot of like TIE fighter and X-wing and like things zipping around in outer space. It's always fun. So there wasn't a lot of that.
The big last battle was very underwhelming.
Yes, and it also so it also takes place on a planet, not in outer space. And then there was this moment where which is kind of fun, or at least had the potential to be fun, which was they sent out a distress call, like everyone who's sympathetic to the Resistance, we need you right now. This is the final battle. And it seemed like they could have had both use that more, and also had like more fan service moments. Apparently, the guy who played Wedge Antilles is seen piloting one of those ships in the original movie. But other than that, there wasn't that much.
I didn't even notice. They didn't do a very good job of calling time. Yeah, Lando just like shows up with 10,000 ships and then it ends. Like it's just like
yeah. I mean, you could show like all the beloved. You could show like a. Like the big purple, the big blue elephant guy, one of his species, like piloting a ship and all sorts of stuff like that. But they didn't do that. But then it also was like, I mean, this is in many of these movies, it's like it comes down to they need to shoot a missile at one spot, and that's how you defeat the giant thing. So they twisted that a little because it's like a radar beacon or something, and then like it shuts down, and it's like it's like a ship. So we need to destroy this one ship. And once we do that, every other ship will explode or fall to the ground or something. So that's been in Star Wars since the very beginning. That it just takes this one magical shot.
Yeah, but this one was much weaker. Like at least before, it was like we have to hit the core of the Death Star. Now it's we have to hit this radio tower. Oh wait, they found out we're trying to hit the radio tower, so they moved the radio tower to the ship. So now we got to hit the ship. It was really lame. I mean, the Death Star that sequence had a real strength to it.
Oh, for sure.
And it took, I mean, they had to repeatedly, they failed a lot before they succeeded. You know what I mean? This thing wrapped up too fast. I mean, I don't know how long that end sequence in the first Star Wars was with the Death Star, but I remember it as feeling like it was well fleshed out. Like people were trying to hit it and missing it. People were flying into the side of the walls. It was not easy to do. Yeah. Right. I mean, Luke had to channel the Force to get the damn things to hit the right spot. There was just none of that here, right? I mean, there was just some ridiculous horse attack.
Well, I actually kind of like the horse, but actually it's similar to a move they did in the previous movie where they had the giant horse-like creatures stampeding through the casino, the space casino.
Except these were on the wings of a ship floating in midair. I mean, I just didn't get how that.
But okay, well, they somehow they do it. So everyone wins. So then they go back to the the Resistance.
You look
planet.
like you're pained. You're like, oh god, everyone wins.
And then they have the final celebration scene. And they had so the moment. I mean, this is total fan service, but this is maybe my favorite moment in the movie is when they give Chewbacca a medal because fans know that at the end of the original Star Wars, Han and Luke get medals, but Chewbacca is standing there on the dais, but he does not get a medal for some reason. Maybe
so now he gets a medal.
He's not a human, but now he gets his medal. So I like that a lot. 40 years later, Chewbacca's heroism is acknowledged. And I guess one noteworthy thing was that the first same-sex kiss in Star Wars universe was in this scene.
I thought that was incredibly cheap,
which was very brief, kind of stupid, but like, I mean, what's weird about it is like, I mean, Star Wars is just a very asexual universe, and you know, there's not a lot of.
That was the one little woke part. For the most part, they tried to keep this thing scrupulously unwoke because of all the complaints about Last Jedi. But that was the one little woke part that they had that it didn't bother me. But I just thought, oh, that's freaking cheap. Well, you know,
yeah,
it's throwaway. It reminded me a little bit of the bullshit gay scene in the Avengers, the last, you know, where, you know, is it Steve Rogers? He's at like the AA type meeting or something, and there's some guy who like talks about his boyfriend or something,
right.
And a lot of actually like gay activists were pissed off. They're like, you know something, don't do it at all if you're going to do it like that. You know what I mean? It's kind of it smells of a kind of a tokenist.
Yeah, I basically agree with that. And I mean, speaking of kisses, we did not mention that Kylo and Rey do share a kiss. When they're like very close, you know, to dying, and I guess
which I thought was appropriate in the sense that I thought that they had developed. I thought that was actually really well done. That they developed a kind of a very strange and intimate relationship, but again, they just did nothing with it, right?
Yeah, I think that's the only really interesting relationship in these three movies.
Yes, sir.
And which points to like, you know, how little like character work or development is going on in these movies. You have all these amazing actors. I think I posted on Twitter that like there was one good actor in the original Star Wars, maybe two if you count Alec Guinness, and that would be Harrison Ford. But you know, Mark Hamill, not a good actor. You know, Carrie Fisher, so.
The acting is not strong in that movie. I mean, it gets better as you go through to Empire, but the first one, when you rewatch it, you realize it's not nearly as good as you remember it being, and that a lot of it is childhood filling in a lot of things, you know.
Right. Whereas in these movies, you know, Oscar Isaac, incredible actor. Ridley, I guess, seems pretty good. You know, she's.
I don't think there's anything wrong with her. I just don't think she had very good scripts.
Yeah, and so Boyega seems to be very good also. But like, what did they didn't give them things to actually do, and there was no like beginning. There was no hero's journey for most of these characters. They had no character growth. They were just like moving around like you know, pegs on the board or something.
And then having these stupid action sequences where they make these very marvelly kind of quippy remarks that just doesn't fit, right? I mean, it just doesn't. It just like you know, when they're being chased, like, they fly now. Oh yeah, they fly. You know, this kind of thing. I don't know why every movie now thinks they have to do this. I know Marvel does it. Marvel actually does it well. Mm-hmm. But everybody seems to think that they need to do this now, and I don't know. I find it very off-putting, especially in something like Star Wars. I guess I just think do you think that they've been trying to assimilate this new Star Wars to the Marvel sort of arc standards? Because if so, I think it's a mistake. I think the success of the Marvel movies is just distorting action.
I mean,
films.
It's possible. I mean, I think what differentiates the Marvel movies, they're pre-existing characters that do have deep backgrounds from the comics that can be drawn on, and as opposed to, you know, most of the characters in this iteration of Star Wars were newly created. The interweaving of the different movies is a novelty in the sense that you need to see them all to get the whole story. And
but how about the constant banter, the quipping, the sort of the...
I don't know if that's like, I don't know how new that is. Like action movies usually have some form of that.
Yeah, I guess now I'm thinking about Lethal Weapon. The original Lethal Weapons had a lot of that, didn't they?
Yeah, often characters are saying something before they, you know, shoot the bad guy, or, you know, I mean,
it really irritated me It irritated me in this one. I'm not sure why. Maybe then
I'm thinking of the Batman, the late 90s Batman movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze, where he kept on saying things like, you know, "Ice to meet you" or something. and I don't know if that's it.
Did you just make that up?
I just made that up, but it's possible it was in the movie. But there's someone once collected all these in a single like YouTube thing of every single like cold ice pun he makes in the movie. But anyway, so I don't think that's new. But I mean, I think, you know, the maybe the Marvel influence is in these things like Solo and Rogue One, where you're telling like side stories with side characters, but weaving them into the larger thing, like, you know, like Ant-Man was never a huge character in the comic books, but they made an Ant-Man movie, they made a comic action movie, and then once you got to Avengers, like, Ant-Man's powers were, you know, integral to the plot to get them to travel back in time, blah blah blah. So you felt like you needed to know who this was and to see all the movies. So if they continue to do that, but I guess, you know, they were supposed to make a Boba Fett movie, and Solo's poor box office performance dissuaded that. But then they have the Mandalorian, which is kind of the Boba Fett thing.
Isn't that being successful? That's successful, isn't it?
I mean, people are talking about it. They brought out this Baby Yoda character that the internet has gone wild for, which shows, you know, there's still you can still mine these classic things and create. I mean, you know, Baby Yoda is a more successful creation, so just in the like 4 weeks that he or she has existed, than any character created in the recent iteration in the new trilogy. Like, you know, people are going to be like loving Baby Yoda for 50 years, I feel like. And
do you think that the absurdly overpowered Jedi in this new reboot is itself a Marvel influence, that they're trying to make them more like superheroes? I'm wondering if Marvel is sort of superheroizing all of the action pictures because of its success. In other words, we're going to get more and more inflated, kind of, and it works with superheroes, but it doesn't really work. I found the overpowered Emperor and Rey and stuff to be ridiculous. I always thought in Star Wars the power was relatively conservatively, not quite as conservative as in the Lord of the Rings, the way it's displayed, but much more so than superhero movies.
Yeah, I mean, they've upped, you know, they've kind of upped the ante in the sense that, you know, just doing the same thing as before is as interesting. So in the original Star Wars, you know, Darth Vader strangles one of the captains or whatever in the Death Star, you know, by going like this, and then I'm pretty sure in this one, Kylo Ren goes like that and sends one guy like flying into the air and like hitting the ceiling or something. So it's like, you know, you need to keep on escalating these things to do something new, and then it gets like ridiculous at some point. But you know, the original Death Star was like, here's a moon that can destroy a planet, and then when they essentially told the same story again in Force Awakens, it was like, here's a planet that can destroy a sun. So, you know, they're just like, well, what can we do? Let's just make it bigger. So I feel like there was one other thing I wanted to touch on. The very final sequence. So Rey goes back to Tatooine, finds Luke's home at the moisture farm, and buries Luke and Leia's lightsabers in the sand. She has her own lightsaber, which I think we're supposed to understand that she built herself, which in the lore is like part of becoming a Jedi, is you build your own lightsaber. And then a old lady, you know, walking through the desert, comes up and says, like, "Who are you?" An
old lady walking through the desert. Just meditate on that for a minute.
And she says, "I'm Rey," and then she's like, "What's your family name?" And there's like a long pause, and then so I think Rey looks and sees Force Ghost Luke and Leia like on the horizon, and then she says, "Rey Skywalker," and that's the end of the movie. So what do you think of that?
So I'm sure that it's not this explicit, but all I could think of was, oh my God, identitarian logic is now in Star Wars. I'm not a Skywalker, but I identify as a Skywalker. It's like, you know, I identify as a woman. I identify as a this. I identify as a that. I'm like, what the fuck is with the identify, right? It's like, you're not a Skywalker. If anything, you're the opposite. You're a fucking Palpatine, for God's sake, right? Wasn't that the whole point? And it's just like, can you just identify out of being a Palpatine and into being a Skywalker? I mean, and doesn't that also diminish her overcoming the evil? You know what I'm saying? I mean,
yes, I agree.
I didn't understand it at all, other than in this stupid identitarian kind of way.
The only way I can understand is that they came up with the title "The Rise of Skywalker," and you don't understand what that means until that scene, the very last line, when she's the new Skywalker. But like, I mean,
and why do that if you're ending the saga?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so I'm once again stealing from this Slate thing I listened to, but they made the point, if she had said just Rey, wouldn't that have been a better ending?
Yes.
and so they would have had to change the title of the movie, but it was like, okay, she is embracing, like, she was a scavenger. She's embracing her like her true identity is not her lineage. It's like who she was,
right?
Who she became. She's self-created.
And that would be consistent with all the other things we were talking about. The Force being more democratically distributed, it not being a lineage thing, the sort of the okay boomer sort of logic of, hey, don't venerate the elders so freaking much, that would have been consistent. But this, it was consistent with nothing. It was just annoying, right?
That seems like a big misstep to me. It almost, there's a, did you ever see the movie Happy Gilmore, the Adam Sandler movie from the 90s?
Oh yeah, it's hilarious.
So there's a scene at the very end where like the characters who have died are like in the sky, and one of them is a crocodile, and one of them is the guy who taught him how to play golf. So it was kind of like that like the ghosts are looking over in a very cheesy way, and yeah. So okay, so. Final thoughts? There was one other thing I wanted to ask you what you thought about.
Do you think, what is the problem? In other words, why can't they do these series anymore? Do you think it's partly because of the media environment? In other words, one of the things I was thinking about was that back when the original trilogy came out, a lot of people I remember being pretty unhappy with Return of the Jedi with the Ewoks, right? And it certainly caused some fan discussion. Now, there wasn't all these platforms on which to discuss it, but there still was a discussion, whether it was in the fanzines and the letter sections or just in between people. What I don't remember was the kind of consuming hatred on the part of fans that would cause them to try to destroy or hurt the franchise, right? To hurt the product. And I'm wondering do you think with these properties that have such intense fandoms, it's really not possible to make good series anymore because there's just too much temptation to react to the fan reaction. In other words, why do you think it just seems, the event with Marvel, it seems to me like they pulled off a miracle. It seems to me the rule, rather than the exception, is that these sagas don't work anymore. And I'm wondering, A, whether you agree, and B, if you think the reason has something to do with what I'm talking about, or if there's something else at work, maybe the nature of the corporations that now own these companies. What do you think is the reason why these sagas just don't seem to work the way they used to?
Well, I don't know I don't know whether I agree with the premise. Because if the saga of the 2010s is the Marvel one, and that, pretty much all those
Game of Thrones fell apart.
Okay, that's okay. Yeah, I guess that's true. So it's very hard to do. A lot of these things originate in the singular vision of one person or a very small group of people. So, like, George Lucas really was the singular vision of the original Star Wars. I think he wrote the script and directed it, and then later on, other directors came in. Game of Thrones, written by one man, George R.R. Martin, and it was his singular vision. And then the Marvel characters, created by Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, and that was a pretty singular vision also, and a incredible burst of creativity in the early 60s. So you have, you have that, and then once it balloons
and Lord
out...
Lord of the Rings.
Yes. And once it balloons out... then you're employing 250 people in the special effects department, and things get complicated, and the way they make these movies now is they cost $200 million, so they have to be able to play in China, and so I think it's complicated. There's the social media aspect where the fans can say this fucking sucks, we hate you, we're burning our whatevers. But also there's the social media aspect where there's the stan culture. I don't know if you're aware of this, STAN is super fans who will defend their beloved actor, actress, or singer, songwriter, or media property and they'll do whatever, and they love it no matter what mistakes it makes. So that exists as well. And the way to get attention on social media is to be very highly emotional in either a positive or negative direction. It almost doesn't really matter which it is, but. So you can say this is the greatest thing ever, or this thing is the worst thing ever. But yeah, I think but then you have like Star Wars is now like it used to be Lucasfilm, the studio created by Lucas, and now it's the biggest being run by the biggest creative intellectual property company in the globe, and they have different interests than just telling a good story. So I think it is hard, but it's always it's like telling it's really hard to create something really good. It's much simpler to create something mediocre or bad. So it's the rarity.
Hasn't that always been the case? I mean, look, it's not as if. I mean, if you watch documentaries on the making of 2001, you watch these things were fraught and very difficult to make, and especially because the technology was more primitive to produce special effects sequences, especially convincing ones, which are a lot more laborious. It feels to me like
that was a very, speaking of singular vision, I don't know if you remember, I did an interview with a guy who wrote a book about 2001 about 2 years ago.
Yeah, that was very good.
That was Kubrick's singular vision of how to get this thing out here. And they did make, Arthur C. Clarke wrote additional volumes in the series, but Kubrick was not involved in. They made at least one more film, 2010, I think, but which I
thought it was very good. I think that's a very underrated movie. And you should, if you don't remember it, you should revisit it. I think you'll have a better opinion of it.
I read the book. I don't know if I saw the movie. I don't remember it.
With Roy Scheider and John Lithgow, it was very good. I would recommend it. I just feel like there's something in the current environment that's making it very hard to create good mass media art. And I feel like it's a combination of the companies that now own these things and their hypersensitivity to social media reaction. But I don't know if you don't think that has a strong role to play as I do, I would accept that. But that's what seems to be different. Making movies of this scale was always hard as hell, right? But maybe you didn't have quite as much very skittish corporate interference. That's certainly the case with the music industry. In the 70s, artists, really far out, whacked out artists could get major label deals. Who they were willing to take risks. And now I think that the environment is so risk averse, and part of it is because the environment is so much more hostile. Do you not think there's?
Yeah, I think there's something about that. It used to be that criticism was an elite thing. A movie would get reviewed by the paper and maybe a magazine or maybe like a local TV news station or something, and that was about it. And if people didn't like it, they could talk to each other about it in real life, but it usually couldn't go much beyond that. So that's changed when people can express their displeasure much more easily. So, but I guess
companies are much more afraid of it. The companies are much more risk averse than they used to be, and maybe that's just because there's more at stake, or maybe because the companies now are so large that they're starting to sort of react in a shareholder sort of logic rather than.
Yeah, I could see both of these things working together. But most movies, since the studio era have been put out by essentially big corporations, and so there's always been an aspect of we're trying to just make as much money as possible, when it comes to movies, they also really care about winning Oscars and stuff. So they're saying for whatever strange reason they that's almost as good as making a bunch of money. So So the artistic side of it still can matter in that world.
So where do you think we're going after this? Is it just going to be one-offs in the universe? Or do you think they're going to start a new saga at some point?
I have no idea. It's everything has flowed from that first 1977 Star Wars. The 8 more movies, if I'm counting right, came out of that. So that's a lot. But it shows the power of that original film. And, it's really hard to start something new that has that kind of lasting appeal where you can iterate off of it in different ways. So I don't know. I think the fact, as we mentioned at the very beginning, that a key plot point in this movie happened in a Fortnite video game is interesting, and maybe points towards the future of this kind of stuff, where it's I've never played Fortnite, but I assume part of Fortnite is that you can like buy like power ups and stuff and like make your character better or whatever. So that's a way to extract money from people.
Yeah.
Kind of like gambling, like
They're called microtransactions.
way.
Yeah.
It's shady, especially when the people are not like legal adults who are doing it. And it also like it plays on like addictive behavior. So that kind of stuff. And if they get they'd rather have like 10 million people playing Fortnite and buying power-ups every day than like going to see the movie, I assume.
Yeah.
So that's one direction it could take. I haven't seen The Mandalorian, but it seems like people have really liked it, and that is somewhat surprising to me because I would have thought this would have been crappy. But so I'm looking forward to checking that one out. And I don't know. I mean, it's. Like I said, it was a singular vision of Lucas for so long. He made 3 good movies, and then he made 3 bad movies, and then they made 1 good movie, and then they made 2 bad movies. That's how I would rank it. So it's 4 to 5, 5 to 4, which way you rank it, and so that's not an amazing track record. But if you just go back to the original 3, then like they really hold up, and so I don't know.
Yeah. Well, fair enough.
Okay, so why don't we end it there? Maybe this is our last conversation on Star Wars ever, but I have a sense that they're going to keep on pumping these things out because they make money.
I hope, if I'm being honest, I hope it isn't, but only if they can do it well. It bothers me. I don't like seeing something this beloved kind of accumulate a lot of bad installments, because I do think it ultimately eventually diminishes the whole thing. And so I really do kind of hope that if they do it, they do it better than this. My worry is just that I think that they're doing things too much in reaction to fandom. I really think artists need to make the things they want to make. And if they're good, they will have an audience. But you cannot do things by art by surveys, right? You just can't. And I thought this was a survey movie. Like this was like, oh God, everybody was pissed off about Last Jedi. We better fix it. And what you got was a kind of a movie made by a committee. It felt like that just really wasn't good and was a very disappointing ending to something that started 40 years ago. I mean, it hurts a little bit if you care about it, So I hope they make more, but I really hope they think very hard about it before they just do something like this. But
I doubt they're going to think all that hard because they want to cash in. And probably the next installment will be will be like, instead of a movie, it's like a video game movie hybrid or something where you need to buy all the power-ups to like keep watching or something.
What do you have coming next, Aryeh?
In terms of the
Talking Heads,
upcoming episodes, I hope to record an episode, hopefully later today, that will be airing in the not too distant future about Tulsi Gabbard. With
oh, great!
I won't mention the person in case it doesn't work out, but we'll see if that one
great. That's
comes together.
great.
And then I have a couple ones. I have one that I'm trying to put together on the idea of the great American novel, and then one on The Irishman, the Netflix Scorsese.
Oh, now I have. Oh gosh, damn it! Now I'm jealous. I have a lot to say about The Irishman. Interesting. Okay, great. That's wonderful. Are you doing that with Milton?
No, not with Milton. It will be with a new guest who wrote about it. I won't say his name in case it doesn't come together, but hopefully that one will come together.
I want to do something with Milton on the new Watchmen. Have you watched the new Watchmen?
Yes. Another trouble.
Want to maybe think about how about maybe a 3-way?
Maybe. Yeah, another one where you had a singular vision in an original version that is universally beloved, and then they make another version, and it just can't.
But here, the interesting thing here is that there is a pretty decent, very, very positive reaction. There's a lot of people who like this very much, including Milton. And so I do think that there are interesting things to talk about there. So give it a thought anyway. Okay. And I'll talk to Milton about it also. Anyway, sounds good what you have on deck. I unfortunately, I'm going back home to New York tomorrow to deal with more health problems with my now 92-year-old father. So I don't have anything on deck. This is the last thing. I'm not planning anything right now because I don't know how long this is going to go on. So, okay. But what you have coming on sounds really interesting. So I'm looking forward to that.
Okay, well, thank you, and thanks for one more Star Wars conversation. Maybe the last, maybe not the last. Thanks to all of our viewers and listeners. Have a good New Year's, and rate and review on iTunes. Blah blah blah. We'll see you later. Bye.
Thank you, Aryeh.